Imagine you could better your life, not just a little, but to achieve the dreams you long ago gave up. But you only have to work for it.
If you are looking to have your statutory declaration, affidavit of income, identity, damage or lost passport, lost license, tenancy agreement, agreement of settlement, power of attorney, last will and testament, and certification of documents, then you need to visit the Alistair Collins firm, located at the Kellyan Mall, 162 Lamaha Street, in Georgetown, between Camp and Waterloo Street. Alistair Collins is a commissioner of oaths and a justice of the peace. Make certain you visit him or call for more information at 649-6410 or 685-6448 or 503-1451. And there's adequate parking available. Go down to the Alistair Collins firm and have all of your legal issues settled and brought to the fore. Alistair Collins Firm. Contact them at Alistair Collins Firm.
Hello, this is attorney Shellen Washington, owner and founder of the Washington Law Firm, located at 455 Utica Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. We're specialized in medical malpractice, personal injuries, matrimonial law, and landlord and tenant. If you're in need of legal representation, please give us a call today. The number to call is 718-877-3100. Consultation is free at no cost to you. So call us today to see if we can be of any assistance to your legal needs. Again, the phone number to call us is 718-877-3100.
All right, hey, guess what? Let's get ready to rock and roll. It's 8 minutes after 9 o'clock. My name is Mark Benshop, right? And we will be rocking and rolling for 1 hour. If our operator can get this Village Voice off the screen, But do remember to pick up a copy of the Village Voice this Sunday. They're printing. They're on the ground. It's a paper for you to read and support 100%. Support that newspaper, the Village Voice. Hey, there it is. I'm on screen, right? Thank you so much to Lemon. Thank you, our operator. We have our guest tonight, all three of them. In fact, I would say our political analyst. We have our political analyst, Tom Anderson, is with us. He should be on just on Wednesday, but we got some important things to discuss. And then we have our legal analyst. Gosh, we're getting bigger, and better right here on 107.1 FM. 107.1 FM. Look, let's take this time out to extend our deepest condolences to the family members and friends of Henry Rodney. Henry Rodney, there was a false start, so to speak, last evening. The papers, some of them out in Guyana, ran with the news. He wasn't dead at that time, and so the family was a bit upset about that. Of course, you could understand why, because people like to ensure that, whatever it is that they need to get done. Miracles do happen, but Henry is gone. He's no longer with us. Henry Rodney, in loving memory of this wonderful human being, a comedian out in Guyana. He has traveled the world. And Henry Rodney is the kind of guy, if he jokes, if you're in the audience and he makes a joke, you've got to laugh. Nobody's going to walk up on stage and do anything to Henry Rodney. Oh, no, that's not the Oscar. The National Cultural Center is not the Oscar. And, Henry would want us to smile, because that's what he did. He made all of us smile. And I recall the last time I was at the National Cultural Center, I emceed a show. Oh, they didn't really pay me for that, but they still owe me. The producers of that show, if they're watching, and, Henry tried to poke some fun at me, but he was a good guy, really, really good guy. So may his soul rest in peace, and condolences to family members, friends, and colleagues of the late Henry Rodney. All right, a little silence there for Henry Rodney. I'm looking at some of your comments. Good evening to all of you, every single one of you. We have our legal analyst. She's with us. Shellon Washington, attorney at law. Shellon Washington, our political analyst. Thomas Anderson, he's with us. Tom Anderson is with us. And we have our Guyanese analyst, political, social, you name it. Former chairman of Region number 10, Sharma Solomon, is with us as well. But just before we get into these gentlemen, a lot of things happening, not only in Guyana, but around the world. But, most of the time we focus on what's happening in Guyana. Well, let's get to Russia. As you know, there was a vote to suspend or to kick Russia out of the UN human rights group. That was done today. 93 in favor, 24 against, abstention 58. But guess what? Guyana is part of that abstention. Guyana is part of it. No surprise at all, right? Tom Anderson said that last evening. And so it happened. We have with us all of our guests this evening, every one of them with us this evening. So we'll get to our guests now. Sorry if our operator can do the honorable thing. And let us welcome our guests. Who should we start with first? All right, whoever smiles first, we'll go with them. Shellon, how are you? Good evening.
Hi, good evening, Mark. How are you? Thank you for having me here tonight.
Yes, and you're here for one particular reason, and we'll get to that shortly. But good evening to Mr. Tom Anderson. How are you, sir?
I'm great. Hello, everyone.
Yeah, you're also here for another reason. And Mr. Sharma Solomon, good evening. How are you? Salaam alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam, Mark. Bless good evening to you and your panelists and to the audience.
Thank you so much. You're here for several reasons. So let's start right away with Shalon. And, something happened in Guyana today, and we want to get to the bottom of that, whether it's appropriate, because the president of the Caribbean Court of Justice is in Guyana for a 3-day visit. He is an invited guest of the Guyana Bar Association. It's not a constitutional body. It's not a legal body. It's just a private bar association. They do not represent lawyers in Guyana. So I just want to make that quite clear. However, the Bar Association, the president of the Caribbean Court of Justice visited, like I said, he's in Guyana, and he paid a courtesy call on the installed president, my interpretation, the installed president of Guyana, Irfan Ali. This is it. That's the president there of the Caribbean Court of Justice, Mr. Saunders, meeting with Irfan Ali. A lot of people seem to be upset about this particular visit, especially at a time when there's an elections petition appeal at the Caribbean Court of Justice, and something I do believe that this president of the Caribbean Court of Justice will be presiding. The government or the quote-unquote government of Guyana is questionable, still questionable, because there are legal matters. There are 2 petitions, and people view this as very, very suspicious. Not only just a courtesy call on Irfan Ali, but look at what is happening here. What Irfan Ali and Jack Gale decided to do, they gathered these guys up quickly. Mark Phillips, Hugh Todd, the Onage Waldron. Look at the setup there to impress upon the Caribbean Court of Justice president, Mr. Saunders. And now let's get to our legal analyst, Ms. Washington, to ask, having described the situation with the elections petition and so forth, and the government, the quote-unquote government is not necessarily that legal as yet. What is your take on this quote-unquote courtesy call?
Mark, I think the very appearance of it is improper, since there's a pending appeal before the Caribbean Court of Justice. And one of the things that this court should be standing for is the appearance of fairness and the appearance that they're administering the law in a fair manner, or where the appearance of fairness is on the surface. And I believe by this act occurred, and the pictures are there as proof of what occurred, I think it's something that should be frowned upon. This should not be, because the world is looking, everyone is looking, and this is a court that is of last resort for cases deriving from all the Caribbean countries, including Guyana. At one point, we were subscribing to the Privy Council, but we're no longer there. And this is our court of last resort. And I'm thinking, if this is a court of last resort, and there you're having the president of the court appearing in a meeting, we don't know what this meeting was. The meeting wasn't broadcast. We don't know what was discussed at this meeting. I think it raises eyebrows as to what will occur when a decision is handed down by this court. Because now everyone is wondering, the world is looking, people are wondering, is the court going to be fair? Was this judge mind prejudiced in any way? Was he influenced in any way? Was he giving anything? We will never know the answers to these questions, unfortunately, because the meeting was done behind closed door. It's not something that was broadcasted so that the entire Guyana is aware of what actually was said or done at that meeting. So I think him going there, appearing with the president, and not just with the president, but look at all the members who were present in that meeting. It's not just him and he's just meeting and have a meet and greet and then he's off to wherever he's the purpose for which he's in Guyana, because as I understand, he was there for the Bar Association, and the Bar Association, if that's the purpose for which he was visiting, it would have been more of appropriate then, because that's just a body of lawyers meeting to discuss issues with him. But in this context with the president, I think it appears inappropriate and is something that we should scrutinize, and we should wonder whether or not anything was discussed there that could have influenced or would influence in the future any decision that would be handed down by the Caribbean Court of Justice.
Well said, Attorney at Law, Shellen Washington. Let us get Tom, sometimes folks might say that you are not a Guyanese, but you know so much about what's happening in Guyana. Let us get briefly from you your take on this, having listened to what the attorney just said.
Well, I agree with Ms. Yellen and everything she said. Totally agree with it. Now, I do come from a little bit of a different perspective, right? So from my view, I'm looking more at it as, what is it that these guys could have said to Mr. Or Justice Saunders, right? What could they have said, and what could have been discussed? And so I did a little bit of digging into Justice Saunders, and just looking to see what kind of man he is, how long he's been in the profession, how he got into the profession of law. And he seems to be, to me, a pretty traditional guy. What I mean by that is he seems to be more in terms of American politics, more on the conservative side, as in keep the status quo and try to keep that the way it is kind of a guy. Keep the whoever's currently in power, keep them in power or help them stay in power type of a deal. Seems like that kind of a guy, an establishment kind of guy. So I look at this and I say to myself, well, if he's meeting with them, then to me, I think he knows what the court's decision is going to be already. He already knows what it's going to be. And whatever it was that they were discussing, I think the discussion was less about what Irfan Ali and what Jack Dale had to say to him. I think it might have been more of what he had to say to them. So that's my opinion. And I think some things he may say at this conference may clue in some hints on that, I believe. That's my opinion.
All right. Thank you so much, Tom. Let's get to Mr. Sharma Solomon all the way in beautiful Microsoft. Lyndon, Mr. Solomon, your take on this?
Hi. I'll take maybe 2 shots at this, Mark, from the first perspective being, and before I get there, let me also join with you, Mark, in extending condolences to the family of Henry Rodney. Friends and family, we've indeed lost a beloved son of the side. But the first perspective I'll take is the justice, Saunders, and even the court itself, because this would have been a request not to him, but to the CCJ for his presence to be here, should be more cognizant of the sort of polarized politics that we practice in Guyana. And the fact that we have a petition and so many matters that over the past 2 years that were brought before the CCJ should have been more cognizant. And if they wanted to play into that sort of political optics, which I'll get to in terms of impression shortly, they should have realized that then they needed to understand that sides should have been engaged. And I am still hoping that the justice is spending 3 days in Guyana, that he would be reaching out to the people in other circles of decision making and influencing the country. If he is to appear unbiased, first to appear unbiased, and I'll come now to impressions, because what the government was able to do today is to portray and convey an impression. You know this in public diplomacy in terms of statecraft. You take the opportunity, whether they're diplomats, whether they're people within certain elevated position of state decision and policy making, you take the time to woo them, if you put it that way, and impress them. And one can safely say that even to create that impression of a functional working government that welcome to put on the sort of optical display in terms of those who would have reached or met with Justice Sanders, one can safely say that impression carries a certain level of weight. And one cannot take away the opportunity to then further infer that having such an impression, it could bias any outcome by Justice Sanders. I think not only that 3 days, one went by today, you have 2 more days to see that sort of different approach in terms of impression to be made, and other sides are engaged. But you cannot escape Guyanese now having this sort of conversation that we are having because of the impression that the government was able to make to the public and more so to Justice Sanders.
Exactly, and that's the impression, the public image, the PR. It's there. That is why, if you look, they had Mark Phillips there, they had Utah there, they had Onage Waldron there. Obviously, come on, I've been around a while now to understand. And those folks, Tom, are African Guyanese who are part of the installed regime. So I guess with that, they just wanted to impress upon Justice Saunders to say, hey, look what's going on here. That's a subtle message. Well, it's maybe not so subtle. You know, go ahead, Miss Washington. Go ahead.
I didn't want to interrupt you there, Mark, but I just wanted to add something because I've practiced in both jurisdictions in Guyana and I now practice here in the US. And I wanted to say, here, if we wanted to approach any of the judges on a case in which we're involved in, we have to have the other side present there also. So I cannot approach a judge without my adversary being present also, because the fear is that I might say something that might prejudice the judge or the justice, or I might say something that might influence the outcome of that matter. And in the eyes of the public, this is wrong, and it's also wrong on the level on which it occurred, because Justice Saunders, if he wanted to appear at a private meeting with the installed government, he should have appeared at that meeting with the opposition there also. So there wouldn't be any appearance that if there was the occurrence of any bias or any prejudice, or there were any talks to influence his decision or his potential decision. And I am fearful that if he already knows the decision and that's what influences decision to appear at that meeting, because that shouldn't be also. If he knows what the decision is going to be, that decision should have been announced publicly, or it should have been put in writing so that the world would have known prior to him coming and mingling with the installed government. It's just the appearance. It appears wrong. It is wrong on many levels. We don't allow it. And if it's not allowed here, why should we allow it in our country? Why should we allow the appearance of prejudice or bias in Ghana? Why should the government allow Judge Saunders, or should be permitted to sit in a meeting with Judge Saunders to the exclusion of the opposition? The opposition should have been invited, and then no one would have anything to say at this point. It would have appeared fair because we don't know what was said. So even if they're sending a message, the message, it's indeed loud and clear, because action speaks louder than words. And it would have been better for them to just invite the opposition to the meeting. No one would have anything to say now.
Absolutely not. It's just the impression, but they don't care about that. They just care about their propaganda and their PR stunts and so forth. And Justice Saunders seemed to have fallen into that trap. But then again, during the course of the elections hearing out at the CCJ, many people, including myself, we looked at Justice Saunders and his antics and his utterances in a lot of the hearings as very suspicious indeed. And so Tom mentioned earlier that he seems to be this kind of like a kind of guy who wants to have a government. Once a government is in there, he wants to do whatever it is that is necessary to have them remain in there. But I guess that's what you said, my interpretation. But he didn't do that during the course of the elections and all those cases that went to the CCJ. They seem to have already had a decision, their minds made up as to how they were going to even though a lot of their their decisions became questionable. So now that we're seeing Justice Saunders, knocking glass, so to speak, with the very people that he allowed to be installed, is highly questionable. But here it is, though, lady and gentlemen. This is not going to surprise you guys. This is the agenda for the meeting. The Guyana Bar, I'm surprised because the Bar Association is basically a pro PPP entity. It's not an entity that represents lawyer in Guyana, like in New York. In New York, there's a New York Bar Association. In Atlanta, the Atlanta Bar Association, and so forth. They represent lawyers, right? The Guyana Bar Association does not represent lawyers in Guyana. But look, I want you guys to take a look at the second from the bottom there. There is look at these guys. Komal Ramkaran is speaking, Devendra Sharma, whoever else. Okay, but look, Nandalal, who is the installed Attorney General. Look at what his topic is: elections petition, law, learning from Guyanese jurisprudence. Elections petition. And they have a case. Anil Nandalal currently has an elections petition case in front of the CCJ. And this is what he wants to talk about in the presence of the special invitee, President of the Caribbean Court of Justice, Saunders. Tom, you're laughing before we get back to the lawyer and Mr.
Yeah,
Saunders.
it proves what I'm saying, right? So here's the perspective I'm coming from, right? I'm looking at it like this. Justice Saunders is an international type of man. Okay, he got a scholarship from the Canadian government, I believe, to become an attorney. He's an international man. He's a very learned man. He's a worldly man. He knows who's in power in the world. He knows what power structures are. He understands how power works in this world. And so he's looking at Guyana and he's looking at a decision in front of his court. And here's the reality, right? So Dr. Irfan Ali was just in Dubai, most likely meeting with Russians. Why? Because the Russian government and Vladimir Putin appear to support the PPP. They like the PPP. I mean, that's just the reality, okay? The Chinese government, they like the PPP. And guess what? The Trump administration, they also liked the PPP. They put certain things in motion. And the way our government works is we don't reverse policy once it's in place. It takes over a decade to reverse policy once it's in place. That's just how we do things. So what's happening now is policy that the Trump administration put in place, which is also supportive of the PPP. So here's the reality of a man like Justice Saunders who looks at this situation and sees, okay, so every major power in the world supports the PPP and my court is just going to undo them? I don't think so. Hello? That's the issue here, right? Like the reality is that the PPP has the support of all of the major players that have any kind of influence on Guyana, period, end of story. And not just Guyana, all of the Caribbean and all of this entire hemisphere. And guess what? The world. Like that's where they're at. And that's why this court has already probably made a decision, even though they haven't made one. And that's why they don't mind having the justice there, sitting down, listening to the PPP representative tell everyone about election law and stuff in the conference. Like this, you have to understand, this is how establishment people work. They support the establishment. They promote the establishment. This is how the establishment operates. That's what's going on here. It's just the reality. I hate to say it so bluntly, but that's what's happening if you just look at it.
All right, Ms. Washington, this subject here that Anil Nandalal will be discussing, it's right here in this program, elections petition. My gosh, talk to our listeners, please.
I mean, it is shameful, and it couldn't be any bolder or more obvious than what's happening there. Because we do have an election petition pending before the Caribbean Court of Justice, that appeal. So it's highly inappropriate. But then when it comes to inappropriateness and what is right and what causes things to appear biased is not obvious to the government in Guyana, because this should have never happened, where where Justice Saunders is invited to a function that the Bar Association is hosting. And by the way, the Bar Association doesn't represent anyone. It's just a collective body of attorneys who plan programs and whatever else for the purpose of edifying the attorneys. Over here, the Bar Association, what they do, they provide CLE, they provide different committees to help us to perfect our skills in different legal areas. Whereas the one in Guyana, I don't know what they have there, but I would not refer to that as a bar association. I love Guyana. I have respect for certain things in Guyana. Some of the judges, I highly respect them, like Justice Barnes. I have a lot of respect for her. I have a lot of respect for Justice Cummins. But it's a shame what they're doing. The Bar Association is hosting a function and you're discussing election petitions, which should not have happened, because there's an appearance there that Judge Saunders would be influenced by what he's hearing. And if it's, as Thomas Anderson said, that the decision might have already been made and he already knows what it is, then it's a shame. It's very it's disgraceful that he would then come knowing what they've already decided in terms of releasing their decision, and he goes there with a meeting with the installed government, and the world is looking, everyone is looking, and they're seeing what's going on. And this is, I think on many, many levels, this is wrong, that the Bar Association would be discussing such a topic, knowing very well that this appeal is pending before the Caribbean Court of Justice. And Judge Saunders, the oath that he took, I'm disappointed, because as a judge, you take an oath to appear fair. And by the very appearance of bias, what people are going to start thinking about this. And I am disappointed that Judge Saunders would go and sit in a Bar Association meeting or function that is discussing issues which is directly related to a case that he is adjudicating on. If he is going to adjudicate on a case and he's hearing information that might influence his decision, then that is bad, because where is the opposition to give their side of the story? Where is the adversary to give his opinion, his or her opinion? Where is the APNU party? Where are they in the Bar Association function? Where is their presentation regarding election petition law? They're not.
Exactly.
I don't see them.
Yeah, they're not going to be there, because you have Pauline Chase, you have Ruggles Ferguson, and then you have Nardell, barrister from the UK, and all these. You have Justice Navindra Singh, and then you have Bevel. When you look at the folks who are representing, who are practicing in Guyana, you look at Kamal Ramkaran. He's the son of Ralph Ramkaran, former Speaker of the National Assembly, former PPP bigwig. Then you have Devendra Sharma, managing stress, and I don't know, probably a lot of stress. But when you look at the makeup of this Bar Association, when you look at the makeup, leaves lots of questions. Mr. Sharma Solomon, take a quick bite of that bar.
Quick, Mark. I wouldn't attempt the Latin, but it's called matter under a judge. All right. And a judge would say this to you if the matter is under a judge, that legally you are binded, or in fact bound to the ethics of not discussing the case, which is under a judge. You can't get into certain content, because you will prejudice the matter, and the judge will then put you before the said court, where you can be held in contempt. That's a legal practice. That's actually there. So I get where Ms. Washington is coming from in terms of the said judge or justice, in fact, understanding that the petition 99, is before the said court that he is seated on, which means he will not be able to guide our Attorney General Anil Nandalal as to what he is going to be presenting on, including if those matters are under a judge. So there is
Sub
actually
judice.
certainly, that's the Latin, certainly. And just to matter on Tom's point in relation to the status quo type of behavior that we see from the justice, we must remember during the election issues of 2020, of those institutions such as OAS and CARICOM that played very crucial parts in terms of the outcome of our elections. The CCJ is an umbrella, is under the umbrella body of CARICOM. So we cannot escape the fact that in preservation of those institutions is what we may have seen the justice behavior, and that continued behavior could prevail.
All right. Well said.
Yes, that's called, you know what that is? That is establishment policies, establishment politics. That's what this is. Clearly, that look, if you look at Judge Saunders, he is the definition of an establishment man. He's the definition of it. So, Mr. Solomon, what you just said, very wise. What you just said, but with your point, excellent point. I got to say, excellent point. Yes, yes, sir.
Here's what we're looking at the time. We have some other subjects we want to deal with. Just show you guys this photograph. This was taken back in 2009. Then President-elect met with all of the justices of the U.S. Supreme Court. All of the justices, right? This is pretty fair because he has no matter. There was no litigation. There was nothing. And so this, it wasn't the first time. And this is totally different, though, right? But here's the thing, Tom and Solomon and Ms. Washington. Twice in recent decades, incoming presidents have paid a pre-inaugural visit to the court. President Reagan and Vice President George H.W. Bush did in '81, and President Clinton and Vice President Al Gore in 1992, right, where they met with for an hour with the late Chief Justice William Rehnquist. But here's what's surprising, though, and not surprising, and this is where, in support of what you guys have been saying all along, no such visit was arranged, mind you, no such visit was arranged in 2001 for President Bush, since the Supreme Court had cleared the way for Bush's victory a few weeks earlier in a 5-4 ruling. A friendly visit was seen as awkward. Look at that.
Not a bias, not a fair bias, man. And just on that point, as you made with the institution, we must remember the point you're making is to preserve the interests of the court and not put prejudice on the court. Point taken. But I think also what comes out there is the way the American courts are constructed, especially the Supreme Court. It carries the sort of bipartisan involvement at some point in time from presidents to presidents. So you may have Trump placing persons who are conservatives and are more in favor of Republican issues and policies, and you see that coming out. And you have, for example, today, Judge, that the first Afro-American justice to be confirmed, Justice Jackson, we can safely say Justice Jackson now, is from a Biden pick and is being accused by Republicans of being an extreme liberal. So the composition and the way the courts in America is put together is quite different from the Caribbean Court of Justice. So I think in that light, the Justice Sanders cannot escape where he sees himself with regards to not having that sort of influence by ideology of how the court lean from particular jurisdiction. You know, unlike how the Americans have the presidents can show how the court lean based on their ideological lean.
You know, the ethics, though, for the law ethics, our lawyer would agree that the ethics, regardless of where, remains the same. whether it's
That's absolutely correct, Mark, and I'm glad you showed the comparison there with how the presidents met with the court. The various presidents met with the all of the justices from the Supreme Court, and except for in the case of President Bush, where they had previously cleared a victory for him. I think it's the very appearance of bias, and like you said, ethics is a very important part of the practice of law. It's a very noble profession, and in this profession, there has to be the appearance of impartiality. There must appear that you're doing justice to all of the people, and there must be no appearance that you're taking sides at any particular point. So I believe Judge Saunders should have taken a page from the books of these judges here. There will never be a situation or instance where the Supreme Court will have to rule and then appear in the presence of that very president. So that's kind of what you just showed. And this is a case where the case is still pending. The case has not been disposed of. And Judge Saunders is probably appearing at a meeting with these folks. So I think ethics is really important. And I think that's one of the things that we focus a lot here. That's not focused in countries like Guyana and in the Caribbean. By the way, Mark, we do not have any ethics course, as far as I know, in Guyana. We did not study ethics in law school in Guyana. But here, we have to study ethics to take the bar exam. There's no such thing in Guyana. So when it comes to ethics, you can't ask Judge Saunders about a course on ethics or what is his ethical responsibility as a judge sitting on the highest court in the Caribbean. I don't think that will play a part in him giving you a response as to why he decided to meet with the installed government. Ethics has never been a topic there, and I don't think it will ever be. It just rests heavily on the conscience of those judges.
exactly on the conscience of those judges, and some of them we would like to believe that they do have conscience, and some of them obviously do not. And here it is again, the conflict of interest. Anil Nandalal is speaking on elections petition law. Elections petition law. There is currently an appeal by Anil Nandalal in the Caribbean Court of Justice, and here it is that he's sitting, expected to talk on elections petition matter in front of the president of the Caribbean Court of Justice, Mr. Saunders, Justice Saunders. Quickly before we move on, you saw the difference here, Tom, right? That even if they had invited or want the incoming president, Bush, then in 2001, to meet with the justices, the Supreme Court justices would have objected to that meeting. Quite appropriate, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, everything's been said, it's right on point. I just think I just go back to, I think just Judge Saunders knows all this. I think he just doesn't care. I think he has bigger fish to fry. It's no disrespect to the Guyanese people, no disrespect to anyone, but I think from his perspective, there are important things that have to happen in the Caribbean, in this region. The world's at war, and they don't have time to be dealing with internal political fights in Guyana right now. That's what I think the attitude is. And so I just think he just doesn't care. He's coming here to do business, to get things done for the region. And whether the people in Guyana like it or not, you've got the PPP there, and it looks like everybody's supporting them, and they really don't care what anybody thinks right now. And that's what it looks like to me.
So it looks, but it can be even quite
Mark,
the contrary.
If I could just say one thing,
Sure.
in response to what Thomas just said. I mean, if that's the attitude of Judge Saunders, it would be it's a big shame, because, like I said before, this is the highest court of the Caribbean. Like the Supreme Court is the highest court of the United States, and this is the court that says it has original jurisdiction and last resort jurisdiction. So if it's a court of last resort, that means I can't go anywhere other than this. This is the last place I can go. And then if you have the judges who doesn't care about appearing impartial or unbiased or dispensing the law with fairness, then I believe we have a serious problem in the Caribbean, and then we will definitely appear to be the laughing stock of the world, because this is our highest court. This is our court of last resort. We cannot go anywhere else other than the Caribbean Court of Justice. This is the last court.
All right, well said. Well said indeed. Let's move on to some other stuff happening around the world today. As expected, Tom spoke about it last evening. He said he predicted that Guyana will vote, abstain, actually. And so said, so done. This is a serious issue, a human rights issue. Look at what's happening in the Ukraine. Thousands of people have been slaughtered by the Russians and so forth, land invaded, and all manner of things. But some folks have different views, but this is a human rights issue that Guyana abstain. Let us, Mr. Sharma Solomon, take the first bite at that.
Well, quick, Mark. I think just over the week, a few weeks ago, we saw that an advisor within the government of Guyana on border issue, former Minister of Foreign Affairs, Carl Greenidge, said that based on Guyana's performance with regards to its human rights records of treatment of people, especially those Asians that are seeking certain status and how they're treated, even though they're CARICOM citizens, will get us before that same court. And we are likely to face the penalty for human rights behavior. I think internal now you look to the behavior, domestic issues on behalf of how the government is treating citizens. Whether it's trafficking in women, you see that as a prevailing issue that is as lawless as acceptable. And as I said, we may end up very low on the terror watch list a few weeks ago. So those sort of things show it's a culture of acceptance of our own human rights attitude as a government and treatment towards people, not only those who are in the region at large, but its own people internal to Guyana. I think then it could be safely said of accepting such atrocities by what we see the Russian government and state is perpetrating against the people of Ukraine. Now, one may say we are not, or the government, because I have not seen at a foreign policy level, except with the statement by CARICOM. I know Ralph Gonzalez did his own thing, but we have not articulated clearly as a nation where we stand on the issue. So unlike before we had the non-aligned arrangement where we weren't taking sides, I don't know if it's such a policy that the government is adopting, but they have not clarified that. Notwithstanding, those are not justification when you see the violation of human rights, that you abstain from ensuring people are held accountable for the violation of human rights. So I think, I think the government, Mark, is demonstrating on the international stage what we as Guyanese know based on their behavior.
The regime in Guyana, the installed regime, the PPP installed regime, is not demonstrating anything that's making any sense. Because if you notice, one day they announced that they are in support of Taiwan, and then the next day they withdrew that statement. And then, not so long ago, they voted to condemn the invasion of Russia in the Ukraine. And now on serious human rights issues, they have abstained. Tom, your take.
Well, I told you, man. I told you they were going to abstain. And the reason why I knew that was going to happen is because I know these guys. They're cowards, man. They're cowards, okay? They don't mind supporting stuff like what Mr. Solomon said. They don't mind secretly supporting the trafficking of innocent women. They don't mind having drug lords run over the country. They don't mind having all kinds of violence happening in the capital city. They don't mind about all that stuff. They don't mind. It doesn't bother them. I mean, clearly it does not, right? And so these guys think they're tough guys, right? But here's the truth. This is how you know they're cowards. The reality is they wanted to vote against the resolution. They wanted to support Russia. They wanted to tell the world, if they could, if they weren't cowards, they wanted to say, no, we don't think Russia should be kicked off, okay? But they're too cowardly to do that, right? They're too cowardly to stand up and actually say what they really believe and actually tell the world what they really want to do. They don't want to say that because they're cowards. And that's why I knew they would abstain. That's just the bottom line. And that's what's going on here. So if you want to know what's in their minds, the PPP, it's really simple. They love what Russia's doing. They love Russia. They love Vladimir Putin. That's the truth. They want to support him publicly, but they don't have the guts to do it. That's just the reality. And that's why they abstained. But know this. Trust me when I tell you this. They will do whatever it takes to support Putin. That's the truth. For real. I'm just letting you know. That's the reality here.
And you are correct. Some of us do know that. Just to have our listeners know that Jack Dale is fluent in Russian. He talks to them. He greets them. He says "Privet" to Vladimir Putin. "Privet, как дела?" And he goes on. And so when he meets with the Russians, he meets with them by himself. He doesn't need an interpreter. And a lot can be said about that, what may be discussed.
Quick, if I can, Mark, quickly on
Sure.
that matter. Just
Yes,
a quick one. I think it is also a reflection of what we see as an acceptable behavior by this government with Russian alignments. And that could be seen as a resident of Region 10 in the Rusal matter. And Russia speaks through its oligarchs. And we had one such oligarch that was in charge of the operations at Rusal. And how that was managed and the way the treatment was meted out to Guyanese and what was accepted by the PPP government, it's only a demonstration of that sort of relationship of what they are prepared to accept as atrocities that are being perpetrated by the Russian state.
And that is so true. And we should just make note that one thought that the coalition government would have dealt with those human rights issues by the Russians, termination of almost 60 persons from Rusal, that bauxite industry, ill-treating Guyanese bauxite workers and so forth. If I had my say, the Russians would have been, I'm not anti-Russian, but the people who control Rusal, that bauxite industry that was given the green light by Jack Dale, giving properties, the oligarch giving properties and lands and all manner of things by Jack Dale and the PPP, they would have been out of that country. But the coalition got in there and did absolutely nothing. They started to dance with the Russians as well, right, for the most part. But let's get to Miss Washington, who would speak on the abstention of the Guyana installed regime on a human rights matter concerning Russia.
Mark, I sort of heard what Sharma Sullivan was saying regarding the message that the PPP is sending out by abstaining from voting against Russia. I think the way they treat their own citizens, the way Guyanese people are dealt with, the conditions under which Guyanese are living at this time, the way they just ignore important matters or important issues that are affecting what we call the blue collar workers. I think it gives a clear message or a clear indication as to why this should be no surprise to the people of Guyana that the installed regime would favor Russia to the exclusion of its own people, or even if it appears to the people in Guyana that there are clear human rights reason why Guyana should have voted and not abstained from voting. I don't think looking at human rights issue is something that is important to this government, because you just look at the conditions in Guyana and you see the way our own are treated, and you know that if they're not concerned about the people who are right there, why would they concern about what's happening in Ukraine? Why would they concern about any human rights violation that is taking place in any other part of the world? So I think it's clear. There are issues that the government should be looking more closely at and should have a heart. They should have a heart that what is going on it shouldn't be taking place. But I think human rights issue is not important to this government.
Certainly, you are correct. They should have a heart, but they actually don't. Most of them don't have a heart, and you're correct on human rights issues and violations. hundreds of folks were slaughtered and drug lords were roaming the streets of Guyana. All manner of things, people being persecuted and so forth. We see it still happening. Tom, you want to take it?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's just I look at these guys and I scratch my head and I wonder, if they had if they had just an ounce of bravery inside of them and an ounce of anything positive inside of them, they would realize that if they just were honest and just said to the world, no, we support Russia on this, they would actually get some benefits out of that. I think they'd actually get some huge benefits out of it. But because they're so cowardly, they end up putting Guyana in a position where no one cares about Guyana. You know why? Because they don't have the guts to actually support the people that they truly support, right? And at the same time, they don't do anything for anyone else. So at the end of the day, they end up making Guyana fall between the cracks, okay? So now Russia looks at Guyana like, yeah, they kind of support us, but they kind of don't, right? And then everyone else looks at Guyana and the PPP like, oh, God, they support Russia. But so what's really going on? No one knows because they're cowards, right? So they've positioned themselves and they've positioned Guyana in a place right now where no one is going to trust them or Guyana, and Guyana is going to slip between the cracks at a time when the world's about to go hungry. And I've told the audience this before, with Russia and Ukraine going offline, that's almost all the world's wheat gone. It's gone. So I'm telling you, the effects are going to be felt in Guyana seriously, and it's going to be felt in a way that I don't think anyone's prepared for. And the PPP has positioned themselves now in a way where they aren't really friends with anybody because they're cowards. Okay, they would have been better off just being honest and just saying, "Hey, we support Russia, man. We're all in with these guys." Just be honest. At least then you can get some benefits out of that. But they can't even do that because they're so cowardly. That's how I see it.
So difficult for them to go ahead, Miss Washington.
I'm sorry, Mark.
That's
I
okay.
think it's just that they haven't taken an open stand or a public view or a public confession as to where they stand. Because Mark alluded to it, earlier, that we know where they stand. We know, but it's just that they haven't gone publicly and said to the world, like, this is where we are right now.
I think
it's so true. 1 second, Mr. Solomon. 1 second, Mr. Solomon. So true. We know where they stand.
Exactly.
And the Americans, I'm sure, know where they
Everyone
stand.
knows.
The Americans probably feel as though they're being used by those. Jack Deal?
That's what's going on. This is what I'm saying. They've actually put themselves in a place where nobody likes them now. Even the Russians are saying, well, you say you're our friends, but you abstained. You see what I'm saying? So it's just like, what are they doing? They're just cowards. They don't know what they're doing.
It's the same thing they did with the Taiwan issue. They said we support Taiwan.
And that's the point I want to make, Mark. I think what the PPP is projecting is a very confused foreign policy at the moment in every level, and not just on this particular matter. I think on when you look at the PPP's foreign policy agenda over the past 2 years, as you mentioned, Taiwan and China. Its relationship and how we see the island gas sector being embraced by the world, and that sort of pushback from this Western Hemisphere support coming from the US and the IDB, and questions being posed of looking in other direction for capital to come through from international donors. I think those sort of confused foreign policy not only confuse the public, but international relations. We're not looking well. And I think today we have made that case in terms of how we went about defending the issue of human rights.
Well said, Mr. Solomon. Well said. 2 minutes after 10 o'clock. Gosh, we have one other matter to deal with before we dismiss court. We want to deal with this matter here. It's very serious about the IDB. If our operator can just put that up. Thank you, Lemon. It says U.S. vetoed IDB loan for this shore base in line with Biden's administration. They vetoed it. It's done with. Some questionable characters. Again, I see Tom smiling. But before we get to Tom, first pick at this. We also heard that Marco Rubio had some problems with this too. The way, and he's obviously batting for the PPP. So he wrote to President Biden to say, hey, what's going on? Why the hell did you block this IDB loan to Guyana? You can't do that, right? And let me just walk you guys back. What is it? Marco Rubio, the history of Marco Rubio. This is what he wrote before the elections. He said, I look forward to the democratic electoral process of our important regional ally, Guyana. It is in our strong interest to stand in support of the Guyanese people as they seek to elect a new government that can advance their security and prosperity. Tom, that was before the elections were held. He's telling people basically, look, elect a new government. He did that. It wasn't in any, sly way. And then we saw Marco Rubio again and some others. They were basically saying, look, authorities to begin a democratic transition, even while there were court matters concerning the elections in Guyana. Even during the recon process, Marco Rubio was sticking his bloody nose in the internal affairs of another country. And this is the PPP he's batting. I'm saying all of this to say that Marco Rubio is pissed off because of that loan being vetoed, being canceled by the Biden administration. And so he wrote to President Biden asking him, what the heck is happening there? But right after he did that, his guy, who's the president of the IDB, the president of the IDB, he's in some hot water, serious hot water of hiring a staff member to work for him, of which he has a relationship with. This matter comes up next Thursday. All of the directors of the IDB will be meeting. Now, I bring this guy back. This guy is a friend of Marco Rubio. Just like Marco Rubio, this guy's parents are Cubans. Marco Rubio parents are Cuban. Marco Rubio has been batting for the PPP. This guy has been batting for the PPP. So much so that the PPP actually voted for him. They strayed from their pattern of voting and voted for this guy to become president of the IDB. He's in hot water now, right now, and he may resign by now or next Tuesday. But then again, I wanted to get in touch with Jessica Bodea. She's the chief of staff. I don't know. I wanted to get in touch with her to ask her what's going on, but she herself may be caught up in this scandal. Let's have Tom take a first pick at that.
So anytime you're looking at that list of senators, I think it was Rubio, Cardin, Menendez, and Reich, I believe, right? So just right there, Menendez, okay, he just barely got away with not dying in jail or becoming a very old man in jail for corruption for bribery charges, okay? First senator in decades to be indicted on bribery charges. And the only reason why he got away with it is because the Trump Justice Department decided that they didn't want to go after him, which they could have easily done. And I say all this for this reason. Think about it. Trump not only let Menendez off the hook, but he also gave a pardon to Senator Menendez's eye doctor who bribed him. So the man who was bribing him went to jail for stealing tens of millions of dollars in Medicare money. Trump gives that man a pardon. He was bribing the senator. The senator gets charged, indicted for bribery from this doctor. So Trump lets the doctor out on a pardon, never goes after Menendez, okay? And look at what Trump and his administration was doing in support of the PPP. So what do you think is going on here? Well, I can tell you what's going on. This is all about you follow the money, okay? Rubio and Menendez have the same political donors, basically. If you look, I promise you, they're pretty much the same, okay? Trump also has the same political donors as Rubio and Menendez. So what's going on here? I guarantee you there is a constituent of Rubio, of Menendez's, okay? This individual, probably a very wealthy American, has put a lot of money on whatever's going on with this IDB loan. And when it got canceled, this man is very mad now. And he's put so much money into these politicians, he's making them move. So if I wanted to, I could look at this IDB loan and with what Rubio's doing, and I could reverse engineer what's going on here. And I could tell everybody within a couple of weeks who's basically the puppet master here, who the Wizard of Oz here is that's controlling Senator Rubio. I can tell you right now. Give me 2 weeks, I can find it. But the bottom line is that's what's happening here. It's a constituent, someone with a lot of money, and they're really mad, and they were ready to do something on this IDB loan. And it got blown up by the Biden administration. So now I really think this loan needs to be truly investigated now. Everything about it with Rubio stepping in like this, in my opinion.
Everything indeed, and maybe that's why this guy is now on the investigations. The president of the IDB, who's a friend of Marco Rubio, allegations that he hired a lady. Maybe I'll get in touch with his chief of staff, Jessica, to find out what's going on with the allegations.
By the way, I don't know if this is important to anyone listening, sure, but Marco Rubio has some very interesting ties, as well as Senator Menendez, with a very prominent family out of Ecuador. Okay, there's this family called the Asayas family. They're bankers, okay, and they're involved with a lot of stuff going on in the region. They're super wealthy. Both Menendez and Rubio basically kind of work for these guys. And I don't know what's up with Ecuador and Guyana, or this shore bank loan or whatever's going on, but that could be where this is coming from, by the way, because those guys are powerful enough to make a guy like Rubio Menendez move.
All right, and he's moving not in the name of democracy, not in the name of any sort of principle, as what he's trying to let us to believe. We know better, Marco. Be quiet. All right, Mr. Solomon, we're looking at the time. Your take on this IDB loan being canceled and so forth?
Well, I think the bank is aware of the matter in terms of the shore-based investment. I know there was indication earlier from the bank that gave those principals who are banking on the loan an indication that they may have gotten the loan, and then that position was reevaluated, and we're at this point where it's actually been blown up. There is no loan. So I think that's one side to look at. The bank is aware of why they are not giving this loan. But with regards to Rubio, there are two things I want to point out. And that would be the issue of the lobbyists that the PPP had openly declared that they have paid $35 million to lobby for them in Washington. I think that lobby is back at work. That lobby is back at work to ensure that all those things that were promised at the elections are delivered. And Mercury is not a hidden agenda. It's an open situation that the vice president now discussed, that to ensure that they have their agenda fulfilled in Washington and the United States, that they have indeed hired this firm. So we can see this as a close connection. The second thing is, just to follow up on what Tom is saying, across Latin America, more so in South America, there is a heavy presence of constituency representation in Florida that Rubio banks on to ensure that he maintains that seat that he holds, including almost 300,000 Venezuelans that live there. So I think what you're actually seeing when we saw the Trump policy and the Trump doctrine with regards to regime change in Venezuela and where Rubio stood. Venezuela holds the world's largest oil reserve. And that sort of influence that Trump was bringing, and we saw with the installing of the People's Progressive Party, in his relationship with oil, that you cannot take Rubio out of that mix. And where his agenda lie in terms of ensuring that certain political organizations are either removed or maintained, and what benefits he arrived, whether it's in Guyana or Venezuela. I think it's very important to look at that sort of linkage.
All right, well said, Mr. Sharma Solomon. We'll get to our closing remarks now. We ask our attorney to put on her legal lens. Here's the president of the IDB, is under investigations now for hiring a staff, and that person is set to, according to a high source, is set to be the chief of staff. His chief of staff brought his chief of staff on, conflict of interest. A lot of those folks from IDB knew of this situation, and allegations, mind you, allegations that he brought his chief of staff on with him, and allegations that he's having an affair with his chief of staff. And this comes up for hearing. The directors seem to be upset about this. His fate now will be decided on by the directors, hopefully by next Tuesday. That's if he doesn't resign. Gosh. You want to take a bite at that, Miss Washington, and your closing remarks, please?
Yeah, just quickly, Mark, I think ethical as well as conflict, issues of conflict is involved there. The president should know the rules when it comes to working for a corporation in this country, that there are certain ethical responsibilities that you're supposed to adhere to. And also there must always be the appearance of fairness with everything. And hiring somebody you're having an affairs with, definitely conflict of interest, first of all, and ethical violations, because you're having an affairs while you're carrying on your functions as the president of the IDB. So I believe when his fate is decided, I don't know that he'll be allowed to stay in the position, but if he is, then I think serious consequences, or there have to be the discussion of how they're going to regulate that to prevent it from happening again in the future. But I think maybe when his fate decided, maybe he will not continue to serve in that position. Maybe he will resign. We don't know. And again, Mark, thank you for having me here tonight. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks to all of your listeners. Thanks to the viewers. I love you guys, and I want to say thank you guys for all the support you've been giving me. A lot of you guys call the office, and I want to say, and you're always encouraging, and a lot of you are using my services. So I want to say thanks to all of your listeners. And I continue to support you and to provide service to you whenever. But thanks again for having me here tonight, Mark. And I hope that your listeners were well informed from the panel you had here tonight. And good night to all of you guys. And once again, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Shallon Washington, attorney at law. I just want to say that the president of the IDB or any other person in the United States, in developed countries and so forth, once they are found out that it is revealed that they are having this sort of relationship and bringing people on, hiring them based on their relationship with these individuals, it is unacceptable in the United States of America. But that thing seemed to be the norm in Guyana and maybe other parts. I just seems to be the norm. Mr. Solomon, let's get your closing remarks, please, sir.
Yes, thanks again for having me on the show, Mark, and to the other panelists and your audience. It's always a pleasure to share with you all. And just to say that, in Guyana, we have to be very cognizant of what is happening. And I always say that our domestic issues that intersect with our foreign policies, or in fact our international relations, is what sets our policies. And I think coming out of this evening conversation, that is a full demonstration of just that, whether it was the issue of where Justice Sanders' matter is, that's an international domestically related issue or domestic issue related. And even the issue of Russia and how we as a nation embrace human rights. Again, domestic, international. And now we see again with our internal interests being questioned by external forces in the US Congress, in fact, in terms of their legislature. So I think it's important for Guyanese to always recognize that, unlike where in fact we should be paying attention, is not only internal to how we are being affected by the People's Progressive Party, but how these actions are reflected on a wider scale in terms of world and geopolitics. And I think that's where we are speaking on this evening. So it was good to have the opportunity to share this. Again, I always welcome yourself and Tom program on Wednesday. I think it's important for that perspective also to come across. And I'll just encourage Guyanese to stay tuned, pay attention, and know that these things are not only shaping some of these things that we're seeing, but general policies within the state of Guyana.
Thank you so much, Mr. Solomon. I just probably bring to your attention that it's nice to have you as a Lindener on and Shalon Washington attorney as a Lindener on as well. And one day when Tom gets to visit Guyana, we can make him an honorary Lindener as well. It's a part of Guyana.
He could come and do some of these fighting. He will be a good addition to the fight that we.
You know, one of the things though, if I was actually on the ground in Guyana, I would have been protesting that so-called conference at the so-called Guyana Bar Association. I hope there are some protests out there to let Saunders know, Justice Saunders know that it is unacceptable what he's doing, and that Anil Nandalal should not be speaking about elections, petition matters, and so forth. But Tom, we leave the last word for you, sir. Go ahead.
Oh, well, wow. Well, thanks for the honor. Just wanted to say I really enjoyed tonight. I really enjoyed listening to both of the other panelists, Mrs. Washington and Mr. Solomon. I mean, I feel like I'm sitting here and I'm speaking to the future president, vice president, and maybe like an ambassador right now. And
so I'm wondering who is the ambassador?
Well, that's you. That's you, Mark. That's you, man. That's you. That's
and
you,
who is
man.
the president?
The president, Mrs. Washington, maybe. I don't know, right? I think. Hey, you never know, right? So,
Ambassador Ben Shop.
these are the types of conversations we should be having, right? Where we have some really smart Lindeners on who are the future of Guyana. That's just the truth, right? So I'm just honored to be here with you guys, and I'm just honored you guys allowed me to speak. And I just thank your audience and thank you, Mark. Thank you. I really appreciate it from all of you.
Thank you guys so much too, and thank you, Tom. And let me apologize to Ms. Washington and Mr. Anderson for asking them to come on this evening on this show for just a few minutes. Just a few.
We know how that works, Mark. Come on, man. Come on.
Mr. Solomon, thank you so much too, sir. Appreciate it. I know we wanted to talk about lots of things happening in Linden and so forth. We will see early next week about that, or maybe sometime tomorrow I'll squeeze you on for a few more minutes as well. But thank you all so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
Take care. Good
All right.
night.
Good
Sure.
night.
All right, and to our guests, hey, guess what? It's almost 10:30. I know you guys are tired. I know you've had a great, a busy day as well. I see you guys are already picking who you want to run for president and all these manner of things. But I'll take a back seat if a position of diplomatic post is offered to me. You never know, but I'm watching on now in terms of the politics and so forth in Guyana. I'm watching on. Thank you all so much. I'll be back tomorrow, same place, same time, right here on 107.1 FM. Someone asked me a question, and Guyanese are brave enough to say that this may be the only show that we don't ask for anything. Of course, we actually do at times. So if your pocket is tickling you and you want to donate whatever it is to us to keep us floating at the radio station, we'll definitely accept, and we appreciate that. We'll leave that up there for a couple seconds, And just let me let you guys know that I was actually thinking. I was thinking of having you guys pay for a subscription every month right here to hear these shows every month. But, I understand what you guys would say. Things tight, tight all over. And I do respect that as well. But whatever it is, we appreciate your kindness. Here's where I'll bid you guys good night and goodbye until tomorrow. Same place, same time. I have a couple of folks on. I want to have Kadaki Amsterdam on as well, the guy with the Bostonian talk the thing. Tune into him every morning as well. And also right after Kadaki, we have our own show right here on 107.1 FM. It's the mid-morning show with Gabby. So we have lots of things happening right here on 107.1 FM. Until tomorrow, same place, same time. Mark Benchap saying, God bless you and God bless our beautiful, beautiful countries. So long.
So, this is attorney Shellen Washington, owner and founder of the Washington law firm located at 455 Utica Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. We're specialized in medical malpractice, personal injuries, matrimonial law, and landlord and tenant. If you're in need of legal representation, please give us a call today. The number to call is 718-877-3100. Consultation is free at no cost to you. So call us today to see if we can be of any assistance to your legal needs. Again, the phone number to call us is 718-877-3100.
Run a coca down something, rock away, run a coca down. Run a coca down something, rock away, run a coca down. Jane Gay, and she think nobody like she. Jane Gay, and she think nobody like she. Run a coca down something, rock away, run a coca down. Run a coca down something, rock away, run a coca down. Jane and Jane, and she rocks her body with high. Jane and Jane, and she rocks her body with high. Run a coca down something, rock away, run a coca down. Run a coca down something, rock away, run a coca down. Jane and Jane, and she walk up in with style. Jane and Jane, and she walk up in with style. Run a coca down something, rock away, run a coca down. Run a coca down something, rock away, run a coca down. Jane and Jane, and them village fire run wild. Jane and Jane, and them village fire run wild. Run a coca down something, rock away, run a coca down. Run a coca down something, rock away, run a coca down. Jane and Jane, and she think nobody like she. Jane